Greetings and salutations, everyone. I hope everyone is still doing well. Have I got one heck of a middle of the night bonus upload for you right now. A little bit of Dogman, a little bit of Reptilian, a little bit of creepy. Before we get into it though, a couple links. As you know, I rely on Patreon, PayPal, channel membership, and the merch to help the channel to continue to grow and go. Links to Patreon, PayPal, channel membership is in the description below. The merch is displayed directly under the video. Also, Dogman Frightening Encounters, Volume 1 through 3, the audiobook versions. They were written and researched by Tom Lyons, narrated and produced by me, Jeff Nadolny. Those audiobooks are available on Audible, Amazon, and iTunes, links to which are also in the description as well. And finally, last but definitely not least, if you'd really like to help support this channel to continue to grow and go, simply subscribe. It does not cost you a cent. Click that like button. It takes half a second. If you don't want to miss out on any of the informative uploads I put out daily, click that bell icon, and folks, please leave a comment. Why? Well, because all these things, they really do help this channel to continue to grow and go. And yes, folks, they definitely do matter. Now, everyone, I have taken far too much of your time. Let's jump into this middle of the night bonus upload, shall we?
Back in 2011 in Rosemont, Illinois, I worked for a nonprofit agency that provided case management services to teens at risk. I got a call that this youth was in crisis, so I drove to the family's apartment in Rosemont, Illinois. I pulled into the apartment complex, and at the other side of the street was a parked bus. No lights or stops, so I proceeded slowly. Well, I parked in an area, was a police unit, and next thing I knew, I'm being tagged as I pulled into the parking lot. I rolled my window down and waited for the officer. When the officer approached, he asked for my papers. I got snippy and said, "Excuse me? See, I'm Mexican-American, and I'm brown as we come." Anyway, he then removed his sunglasses and asked for license and insurance. His eyes shifted. They blinked vertically, and his eyes looked like those of a lizard. I had my license and insurance at hand and slowly gave it to him, as I was still trying to process what I seen. He reached for the documents, smirked, and inhaled deeply, as if he sniffed as he inhaled. He then walked away, and in a few seconds he was gone. I doubted myself and questioned what I had just witnessed. I told myself when he comes back his eyes will be normal. I'm just stressed and seeing things. He came back and gave me a ticket, saying that I didn't stop for the bus, and all I could do was stare at his eyes. His eyes shifted between human eyes and green lizard-like eyes, and when they became lizard eyes, an almost clear-like second eyelid closed vertically. I sat there in shock as he smirked, giving me the ticket. He left and sat there in shock for a few seconds, and then I snapped out of my trance and went about my business. This took my mind off of what I had just experienced until I went home. I told my husband, and he said, "You're crazy." I later went to court to dispute the ticket, hoping to see the officer and show my husband. The officer did not show, and my court was moved 3 times. I, at this time, got a lawyer. See, in Illinois, if the officer that issued the ticket is not in court, then the ticket is dismissed. Well, the judge did not want to dismiss it. So, by the 3rd time with a lawyer, I was given a small fine and the ticket not shown on my record. Well, that officer never showed. And now we are heading to the Hoosier State. Today's first subscriber, Indiana encounter. My name's John. I spent so much of my childhood with my dad teaching me how to hunt and fish. We had land in Franklin County, which is the outskirts of Laurel, Indiana. My dad built our home, and it's located just about 20 yards from deep woods off of Bulltown Road. which was named that because when the farmers would take their cattle to or from the market, that's the path. That's now our road they would travel. We fished everything from bluegill, trout, bass, and the funniest, the infamous, blue channel and flathead catfish. Hunting was no different. Squirrel, rabbit to deer, my dad also showed me how to noodle for snapping turtles, although I never really had the nerve to do that. My best times were with him showing me what ginseng, bloodroot, rhubarb all look like. I would go on those ventures, although not having much luck finding them, as I did the morel mushrooms. I've spent more days and nights in the woods, at riverbanks and lakes, than I ever had or wanted to in some city setting. And these places were my comfort zones, where I felt at peace, where I truly felt alive, and closest to my Creator, and never ever had I experienced anything like what I had in this January of 2010. It was early when I got up and ready to head out and squirrel hunt off some property over by my uncle's house, which was really the same stomping grounds I ran when I was a kid out hunting with my dad. I was going to use my .22 Marlin, which was a good rifle with a Casco scope, instead of a shotgun, because to me, there's nothing worse than picking out buckshot when you're trying to enjoy a hot plate of fried mushrooms, biscuits with squirrel gravy. I got out in the general area of where I wanted to begin my hunt. I found a nice hickory to lean up against, and, just as I usually did, leaned back, got comfortable, and began to rest my eyes. Catch a nap, I figured really quick before it gets serious with squirrel hunt. So I listened for about 5 minutes to see if I heard them cut in this direction or that, which a squirrel on a cut is what we called them, chewing and breaking open hickory and walnut. Just as my usual routine, I fell asleep. I remember when I woke, it was as if I was startled awake, like someone clapped loudly to get your attention by your face. I opened my eyes and was wondering, did I actually hear that, or was it just in my head? I looked up and straight ahead of me and saw something duck down behind a bramble bush that was about 6 to 7 feet tall and about 50 yards out from me. Again, I wondered, am I seeing things as well as hearing them now? Now, I grew up hearing aunts, uncles, cousins, and other trusted people tell me stories of UFO. No close encounters, just lights in the sky. And as for Bigfoot, Harry and the Hendersons came out when I was 9 in '87. And it was something I thought, sure, I can bite on. This is me as a child thinking the earth was much bigger than it actually was. The endless redwood forest in the Amazon with Tarzan and the tribes that never seen civilized man. That's where these creatures roamed, but what I saw, this was something out of a Hollywood movie. I couldn't see it very well still. The sun hadn't quite come over the horizon, and as for everything going silent, I was used to that because the birds were barely even awake at this hour. I took my gun, and thinking I'm about to catch someone trespassing on the land, I moved the scope up to my left eye and began to scan the width of the briar bush, which was about 10 or 15 feet, followed by a huge oak that ran parallel with the bush. I couldn't make anything out. It all blended in, until I made out a sharply pointed ear. At first, I thought it was a bobcat because of the tassel of hair that protruded out of the ear. But as my eyes finally focused in more and trying to decipher what was just bush and leaves to what was hair and facial features, when I saw an eye on the right side of its face looking at me. When it registered to me, there's no branches or limbs for anything as in a bobcat or coyote to be able to appear that it's positioned itself upright, in which I saw when I first opened my eyes. I know the moment when I was looking at something I had never seen before because it felt like a bucket of cold water had been just dumped over my head. and also, simultaneously, my teeth began to chatter. At that moment, I knew what I was looking at, and it was the most definitely looking at me, had been standing upright. I lowered my rifle because there was no way on God's green earth I was going to try to fire on this creature, for lack of anything I had ever seen before. An upright canine? I didn't turn my back on him. I slowly stood up. I was about maybe 150 yards into the woods. My mind was clear and focused. I thought, just don't turn your back on it, and I walked slowly back to the road to the car. It never showed itself fully, and I'm glad. Since this has happened, I can't bring myself to hike in parks alone. I don't go fishing at night if the area is secluded. And those are just long effects. I was about 32 when this happened, so it's been 10 years. I damn near have panic attacks taking out the garbage. What I grew up loving to do with my dad was now something I'm scared to do myself. My dad had passed away in '99 to a drunk driver, and this encounter actually happened about 20 days after I lost my mom in 2010 to cancer. So I never had the opportunity for the two people I had been raised by out in the middle of the sticks with their theory on this. I do remember my dad telling me of one night he went out in the woodshed to grab a wheelbarrow load of firewood for the stove. I was young, so I didn't ask him to elaborate. He said when he had reached the shed he heard a growl that made the hair on the back of his neck stand on end and put him into an utter rush to get back into the house. All he explained other than that he was sure it was not a bobcat or coyote. Looking back, I wish I would have pressed him more, because this man noodled snapping turtles and was the only one the old bull of Grandpa's would respect. In closing, I've only heard of Dogman in about the last 5 years. I haven't shared my encounter, but maybe with 5 people, and I'll only ever say I saw something in the woods I can't explain, because that sounds much more rational than saying, guys, I saw a werewolf. But I know I've come about as far as I can to recover of this encounter. Stories of aliens, Bigfoot, Dogman, missing people, as well as a plethora of other cryptids I have not mentioned. But I can tell you now as I write this, if you were able to tell me you've seen something in the woods, describe it, can't explain it, I believe you, because I've had an encounter too. Today's second, Indiana, subscriber Dogman encounter. Hey Jeff, I don't mind you using my story. Like I said, all we saw was a large black shape. It was pretty far down the road, and at that distance, even a big dog would not have been this big. When I started hearing about Dogman in this area, I immediately thought about what we saw that night and the way we felt. I will ask my son about the dog he hit, but he will probably think I'm nuts. Feel free to use my encounter. Please don't share my name. There's something else I would like to tell you about. I grew up in the country in southeastern Indiana. We had about 75 acres of land, mostly wooded. There was a small pond where my dad's pastured our horses. To get there, you had to walk through a field behind our house, then through a wooded area with a very wide path that had to be mowed. I was about 8 or 9 years old, and I would go back and pet the horses a lot. I can remember getting very nervous walking back to the house and hearing twigs break when nothing was there. I remember thinking maybe it was a bear, but we don't have bear in Indiana. My heart would be pumping very fast, and I would usually end up running until I got to the open field. The thing is, I never felt the way going back to the horses, only coming home. I also remember a nightmare I had when I was about that age. The windows in our house were the kind that were hinged at the top. To open them, you had to unlatch the screen at the bottom, lift it up over your head. The glass window had a crank that you turned to get it away from the frame. Then you pushed the window out and finally put the screen back and latch it. To close, you did that in reverse. One night I woke up from the nightmare that scared me so badly. It still brings those feelings back to me when I think of it. I dreamt I was asleep, and all of a sudden a bunch of wolves were trying to get into my bedroom. They were pushing on the screen and jumping in. I woke up just as they got in. I think I may have heard dogs barking in my sleep, which brought on the dream. But why wolves? Why not dogs? The windows were high enough, and that would have taken a very large dog to reach them, but a wolf would have had no trouble reaching them. I remember how demonic the faces of those wolves looked in my dream. It scared me so bad. I woke up scared. I chalked it up to an active imagination. But they say that dreams are the mind's way of processing things that happen during the day. I don't remember if I had gone to the woods that day, and maybe the dream was a result of getting scared when the twig snapped and nothing was there. I'll never know why I had that dream, but it was a dream that still affects me to this day. And I'll be 65 years old this June. I've never told anyone about my dream or the night with my granddaughter. We don't talk about it. It felt good to actually tell someone who wouldn't think I'm nuts. Thank you. Today's third subscriber Dogman encounter. Hey Jeff, I had an encounter with what I am 99% certain was a Dogman. It had to have been 93 or 94, so I was either 3 or 4 at the time. This took place in the current town of Decatur, Illinois. Little backstory. I was a pretty nervous and scared kid, so of course I was afraid of the dark, and I would have to sleep in between my parents in their bed from time to time. With that being said, obviously, I was in a very comfortable space and not afraid when I slept alongside of them. I should also mention, in this house, the rooms were a bit cold, so my parents' room was in the very back of the house, and the back door was in their room to the left side, and the back door, of course, had a window in it, and was covered with a thin white curtain. It was one of those nights where I was afraid of the dark. My parents decided to let me sleep with them again. I lied in the middle of the bed with my mom to my left and my dad to the right. In their room they had a dresser that held a television, which they usually kept on at night, but the volume was very low, but loud enough to sort of hear white noise. This particular night I woke up and distinctly remember that I was not afraid, nor did I have a bad dream, nor did I need to use the restroom. I just woke up for no reason at all. I started watching TV. I couldn't tell you what was on, but I do remember being tired still. And as I've grown and revisited this memory, I can remember feeling very alert. No rhyme or reason to it as far as I knew. I was very into the TV for this short amount of time. Then my eyes wandered to the back door. I saw a silhouette that was very close to the door. At the time, I associated this silhouette of Batman from Batman, the animated series. Not the full body, but the head. My second thought after Batman was werewolf. There were large ears on the side of the head that were very pointy and a fairly decent shaped head. I recall seeing shoulders. I don't remember seeing the end of them though, so they must have been pretty wide. At this moment, I was not feeling scared or afraid. Just very alert because I must have felt safe lying next to my parents, even though they slept through this whole entire time. I never saw anything other than the silhouette, thanks to the white curtain over the back door window. I must have fallen back to sleep because I don't remember seeing anything walk away. There weren't any sounds of scratching noises, if my memory serves. As the years went by, I was about 10 years old, my oldest sister came over to do laundry. Somehow we got on the topic of paranormal stuff, which I was very interested in. And for some reason my sister was telling her baby brother experiences with ghosts that she has had. Then I remembered the very story I just shared with you. Of course, I started telling her. She listened attentively and couldn't tell she was humoring me. She really wanted to hear it. The reason I say this is because a detail that I hadn't remembered until a few years back, when I began thinking about what happened all those years, came flooding back to me and hit me like a ton of bricks. I definitely got goosebumps and felt creeped out when I came across this one detail. When I was telling my sister, I told her about how I had seen a real werewolf at the back door when we lived on Grand Avenue. But then I realized the detail I had somehow forgotten. It had hands. I was explaining it to her at the age, and I definitely recall using my hands to show her what I had seen. Put your hands up, palms out, up by your shoulders. A little above your shoulders, actually. That's what I showed my sister, and the image in my mind was there. After that time, it was a little fuzzy, but it was like the final piece of the puzzle. It almost felt complete. Not sure if I'll remember if it walked off or if I just fell asleep. But either way, I'm okay, and did not pursue any sort of mischief, as I've heard that Dogman seems to be famous for. Always keep an eye out for strange things. That was my encounter with the Dogman. Thank you for letting me share, Jeff. Tonight's final Indiana Dogman subscriber encounter. I shared this last night, but because we're in Indiana. Hey Jeff, I'm a big fan. My name is M, and I've had some encounters. My first took place in '97. I was 17. Me and my friends had a spot in the woods where we'd hide and smoke. One afternoon, I was out there by myself. Time got away from me, and it was getting dark fast. I started back at about the halfway point. Something or someone walking behind me. I stopped walking. It stopped walking. I turned around to try to see who or what was there. Just out of my line of sight. But I could hear this deep, raspy breathing. My blood ran cold in that moment. My instincts took over, and I slowly walked backwards until I got to the logging trail that led out. Back then, I had never heard of Dogman all these years. I thought it was a Bigfoot until last year when I started listening to your channel. Now, my second encounter happened 2 weeks ago when I saw one. It was about 1 a.m. I was outside of my girlfriend's house smoking a cigarette when everything went dead silent. And this big, dark, massive shape ran across 2 yards and a small 2-lane road in about 3 steps. It looked like a bodybuilder, had human-like legs, no tail, and all I could see was the side profile of the head. It had a long muzzle and pointed ears. I couldn't see its eyes or its teeth, but both took place in southern Indiana. You can use my name. Your fan, Mike. Well, that brings us to the end of Indiana, and now we step over to the state of Iowa. We have one subscriber Dogman encounter from Iowa, and here it is. Hey Jeff, this is Iowa woman. After the encounter, while I was hunting with my stepdad, my boyfriend at the time, and myself went coon hunting. I've always loved to hear the bays of dogs as they track, and we were listening for them to hit the trail. It was a black night. The lights we had were on our heads. All of a sudden, a pack of coyotes surrounded us, barking and cackling. My boyfriend was very scared. I told him not to run and to turn his back to mine. He was too scared to even do that, and I think it drove the coyotes closer. They were 16 to 20 feet around us. My wolf spirit came out, and I moved my headlamp up just enough so as not to blind the coyotes. When I saw eye shine further off, but I couldn't make out the form, just knowing it was too high up to be a coyote. My attention was brought back to the present by my boyfriend grabbing my arm, and whispering, "What do we do?" I started looking at the coyotes and growling as deep as I could. I've always done this when encountering a barking dog as I grew up. Most of the times they would submit, but sometimes one would jump at me and I'd have to hurt it. The leader of the pack paced out a pace, and I did too. He paced out one more time, and I was about to step out when my boyfriend's light fell on my rifle. All of a sudden it was like I was a lion or something because they all scattered, barking and whining. I'm not sure the figure further out signaled them, but it was a weird experience. All at once the dog started baying on the coon trail, and my boyfriend grabbed my arm, so I didn't have time to look back and get a better look where I had seen the eye shine. I think he was glad just to be getting out of there. I ended up moving out of that little farmhouse because the older gentleman died, so I moved into town before finding a house that I could afford to buy. This house was just far enough on the edge of the town as to feel I was still in the country. There was a cornfield to the west and a little stand of trees that went all the way to the river. One day, I saw a doe running out of the corn through those trees and down the road just south of my house. I knew that she was hurt by the way she ran. It was as if she was herded that way. I looked for my fowler. That's what I called him. I had no way of knowing what he was really up to. I didn't see him. I just knew that he had found me again. I lost that house on our first flood in Iowa, which made me move further inland. I didn't have any more experiences with my fowler until 4 years ago. I would hear a smack on the building that was used for storage in our apartment. Then, near my window, this went on for 2 years. The moment I gave my rifle to my son, they became braver. My fowler remembered my rifle and what I could do with it. There was a bush on the east side of the apartments that went from the corner of my apartment to halfway across my living room, and you guessed it, the head of my bed was right under the bedroom window. I have fibromyalgia, and I have lost all feeling in my right hand and most of my left side, as well as my trigger points in my body, so I don't sleep well at night without medication. I would hear what I thought was him creeping around my window, trying to make me scared. I would chuckle and say, "Go away." I told my friend I talked on Skype all about what was happening to me, and he said it was a Dogman, and had me listen to some Dogman encounters. That winter, 2 winters ago, we had a 2-week blizzard. I would go to bed and have these nightmares of my 2 best friends and me being chased by something that wanted to kill us. I would always be in the back of our group with either a tree branch I made into a club or a very long knife. Never really scared, but more protective. To my surprise, my fowler stayed at my window for those 2 weeks. He never had any fear He never got the fear he expected from me, so he changed his strategies. I went to bed on the 4th night, and he stayed in my head, but also seemed like it was all around me, that at last I found you again. This surprised me, and I asked him why he was trying to give me nightmares. He said they feed off of people's fear, and it was like candy to children, sweet. I chuckled and said, "Well, it didn't work, did it, Dogman?" He bristled. "Remember how I told you before I had a connection with him? Well, being this close, I could feel his reactions. I told him that if a Dogman, then I wanted to see you. He told me no. If I looked out the window, he would have to eat me. I huffed and puffed and said, 'Fine.'" As I laid down, he said, "This will tell you I am what you call me." He had torn the grating off the foundation and stuck his nose in it, and all I smelled was a putrid smell of decay and death. The only thing that was between me and him was my window, the plasterboard, and a piece of paneling. I gagged a few times, and he laughed at me. He would ask me questions about why I wasn't scared of him or stuff. That made him curious. I asked him who he was once, and I got no answer. I also asked him what he was eating, and he let me hear the dying tapping of one of the rabbits under the brush. So he was eating any animal that lived there at the time. He started filling his time with going through my mind, watching my childhood like a movie. I would catch him laughing at once in a while I was asleep. I woke up laughing my ass off, and I could hear him outside rolling around laughing. So while I slept, he was still going through my mind. We got to the day I went hunting with my stepdad, and he stopped. There was an unspoken message of who he was. "So that was you," I said. "Yes," was all he said. He didn't go through my mind again while I was awake. He seemed to withdraw, but he always had a nose in that hole, and I breathed that putrid smell for a week and a half. Before the storm was over completely, he ran off saying he had wished he was human. That's when the game stepped up. I would find myself turned on my back and being held down on the bed, unable to move. I found that I could move my left leg a little. I don't know if it was because of the nerve damage or not, but I got my heel hooked on the side of the full-size bed, and then I used it to move myself close enough to get my damaged right hand on the mattress too. I fought with all I had, and soon I was moving onto my side. When they let me go, I almost fell to the floor. This happened for a week, and it became easier with each time, until they could no more hold me. The reason I say they is because I heard them talk outside my window before my fowler hushed them. Another time I awoke speaking in their language. It was guttural growls and almost sounded like Native American language or something like that. I would know when my fowler was there outside of my window because I would smell this dirt like freshly dug grave. I ended up having open shades on my windows for the crew that was fixing things. That night I heard a roar in my head. I told you never to open that window, so now I'll have to eat you. I jumped up from my bed as the window was being torn from its frame and yelled, "Jesus, save me." He stopped. The next morning I went out to inspect the window and took pictures for my landlady. Of course I couldn't tell her what really happened. My own family thinks I'm crazy. That night he also wrote across the house. I moved my bed into the inside wall of my room, but they found a way to torment me still. They broke the back door hasp and padlock off and crawled under the floor. There were only 2 of them, small enough, but I could still hear them. Something banging into the pipes under there. Somehow, they could reach up under the floor and the mattress and try to grab my arms and legs. Every time their claws would touch me, it burnt. And if I was asleep, I came awake, swatting, then running into the bathroom where I was safe. One night he came back and I told him I wasn't going to talk to him anymore because he broke our trust by trying to kill me. He called me White Wolf and said that he was sorry and that he would be back sometime. He did let me see him on Christmas night, almost like a present. I saw what I thought was a cow or a hog. I really thought that was strange because no cows had ever been there before. The closer I got, the bigger it became, as it absorbed all the light and darkness around it. He was lying down, holding his face or eating his kill, and black could not describe his color. But now I understand why they call them buffalo wolves. He was standing up. He would have had to have been as big as one of the same shape of a buffalo. Second email, same subscriber. Jeff and all listening, it's Ohio woman again. I left things out of my encounter with my fowler because of the degrading things that will be said about them. I have heard others on the channel saying the same things I've experienced and getting shot down for them, so I decided I would let you know more of my encounter to encourage those being hurt by comments and let them know that they are not the only ones experiencing this. First, a reminder, please don't let a link be made between you and a dogman. They seem to start the link while you are young and then continue to visit you throughout your life. They always find you sooner than later, no matter where you are. While talking to the dogman for the week and a half during the blizzard through telepathy. Yes, I said telepathy. They also have a language that I was speaking one night as I slept and was pulled out of my sleep still speaking it. I don't say these things to hurt anyone or go against others' belief, but I feel it is a link that is formed that permits these things. Since I forged that link, I found out things. He told me their history was to protect the Native American burial grounds, and black magic was used to make more of what he called dog soldiers. I'm not sure if that is what the earlier people called them, or if that is the only term he knew. Since they are the keepers of the dead, they are able to make burial mounds or portals using certain bones from animals. I found after the blizzard that fowlers would come to me and smell like fresh grave, dirt so strong that it took my breath away. Later I found out how this was possible. They ripped the shrub of 20 feet long and over 6 feet tall out for security reasons after my window was half torn out by my fowler. When they did, the smell of decay was 10 times worse. Then, when he had his nose pressed against my inside wall that blizzard, they were able to create this decaying smell when they want to, so it petrifies people. Fortunately, it didn't faze me, except for a couple of gags, which amused him. There was a mini graveyard of bones woven into the roots of that shrub, at least 4 feet wide. I wanted to take a picture of it, but the crew doing the work was there until it started to get dark, and I wasn't going out. That night, Fowler came from a part of the shrub, and the clod of dirt was being thrown at my window. I told my fowler, and he was upset. Before the shrub was taken out, he would come and visit me. This next part is going to be hard to believe, Jeff. I hope you still read it. I was given a dream of me in my wolf spirit running through the forest, romping and playing, then howling at the moon when I reached the top just to hear howls sounding off, and knowing I finally belonged to the pack that cared. I have always been the black sheep of my family because they could not understand me. I would rather be alone with my animals than with human company. My kids don't even care about me. I've developed fibromyalgia and then nerve damage, which left my artist career and art teacher thing of the past. I had hit rock bottom when my father gave me that dream. He used that and my compassion for others against me. After that dream, he showed me how he was turned by black magic and his friends getting him drunk, then making him drink the black liquid. He didn't want that life, but he was given no choice. This is where it gets really weird because that dream was transferred to me. I was the one turning. I flew up from the bed looking around trying to figure out what was going on. All I could see was gray. Nothing of mine was left in the room. I started feeling for pillows on my bed, but everything was gone. I saw black ooze, as I called it, climbing up my body. I yelled, "I will not be the darkness. I am in the light. God is my Savior, and I will not serve you, Satan." As I kept yelling, I was God's and would never serve Satan. Even if I do turn, I felt myself being held up, and the gates of hell opened under my feet for a second. I felt hands pushing me back, ooze off of my body, and I watched it was going into the pit of hell. I have often wondered if this is what happens to some of the missing people that can't be found, the ones with no forced entry into their homes, but the door or window being blasted apart. 2 days later, I was on my way to see the doctor in town. I walked out of the apartment building and was met with a soul-wrenching howl of a wolf that has lost its mate. Before I knew it, I was heading toward it and only caught myself before I went past the side of the building. All I could see was fog, nothing else, and knew it was an ambush. After that failed attempt, they used a small pig to lure me to my window. I assumed Fowler stuck it, letting it scream. When I told him I wasn't going to be lured into that trap either, he let it go, and the others damaged it more until they killed it. The upstairs neighbors didn't know the danger they were in. When staring out their windows, the Dogman might seem to be your friend, but it's only to start a link you can't serve.
All right, folks, one heck of a horrifying middle of the night bonus upload. I think I'd much rather deal with Dogman and Bigfoot than Crawler, Reptilian, and feral humans. Something about those strange kind of humanoid creatures just doesn't settle well with me. Anyway, thank you for supporting the channel. Your support is what makes the channel special and what continues to make it grow and go. Everyone, please stay safe, happy, healthy, and ever vigilant, keeping an eye on our children, our pets, our family, and friends. These creatures are real, they are out there, and they are dangerous. Share this information with the people you love and care about, and it may just help save their lives someday. Until next time, never stop asking questions and never stop looking for answers.